One thing that will stick with me about traveling during a pandemic and being on my bicycle is just how wary a lot of people were about getting too close to me, a stranger. Unsurprisingly, people were, very much at a safe distance. Those experiences really are very illustrative of the situation we find ourselves in. When I was up in Scotland, I was wild camping in these amazing landscapes. But the idea I kind of had in my mind was that I'd be able to finish each day in a warm pub, sit next to a fire and have a couple of beers. But the situation was that all of the pubs got closed about 2 or 3 days before I arrived in Scotland, which meant that that plan completely went out of the window. And it also meant journalistically, it was much harder for me to mix with people and to uncover their stories. So I spent most of my nights in my tent, wild camping in the Highlands, basically just taking in the surroundings on my own because I couldn't get to those pubs to mix with people and to really try and find out how people were feeling in Scotland. When I was up in Shetland and Orkney and the Scottish Highlands, I had to be much more prepared. So I carried the majority of my provisions. I had my coffee pot and my stove. I had my food, my pasta, everything I would need for at least a couple of days of cycling, because most of the time I was camping in the middle of nowhere and I was really trying to have quite a wild experience. But if you add into that the fact that all of the shops were closed and it was very, very hard to pick up things when you needed it, it made that experience much more challenging. When I dropped down into England through Cumbria and the northwest, everything was a bit more alive, everything was a bit more vibrant, and that meant that I didn't have to carry quite as much stuff with me. So I started to lighten the load slightly by just a few kilograms, and by just doing that allowed me to move a little bit quicker because I could stop at a coffee shop and pick up a sandwich or go to a supermarket and just get enough food for that night. Whereas up in Scotland that was quite impossible because not only was it already a place where I'd go 50 or 100 miles between towns up in the Highlands, while at the same time when I did arrive in those towns, well, most of the shops were closed, which makes that experience even more challenging. The regionalised nature of the lockdowns we've had in Britain have meant that in one morning I might be cycling through an area where all of the cafes would be open, the supermarkets, the pubs are alive and well, but then a couple of hours later I'll find myself in a part of Britain where none of that is going on. It's much harder to even find a glass of water or to get provisions from a supermarket because a lot of stuff is closed. So that has been one of the most interesting aspects of this journey, moving through different parts of the country with slightly different intricate levels of lockdown. At least now with this national lockdown, we know that pretty much everything in every region is exactly the same. But cycling through different regions with different types of lockdown make that situation quite hard for a cycle tourist who's trying to get from A to B.